Nathan Segal, welcome back to Empower Network TV.
Thank you.
Tammy and I are excited to interview you. This is round two, everyone. We tried to do this, 2 days ago, but my Wi-Fi sucked. And so Tammy and Nathan were there going, Amos, you're frozen. So Nathan, welcome back. We're excited to jump into this. Tammy's got a bunch of questions for you because Tammy was
Oh, good.
loving what you were talking about, Nathan. So Tammy, how should we start this? Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, well, probably people are not going to have seen maybe what we did earlier. So maybe you could just give us a little intro of yourself again, because, well,
Oh,
we have
well,
fresh eyes out there.
yeah, I'll keep it short to like the last 25 odd years, but um, let me think. 1998, I got fired from my job as a software instructor. And shortly after that, my cousin came up to me. He was a freelance writer and he asked me, "Do you want to learn how to write?" And I had no prospects. I was in a new city. So I said, "Sure." And I just followed his instructions and I became, as he told me later, his number one protege. But all I did was follow his instructions and I started getting published in magazines. Now, at the beginning, he asked me to do a mind map to do with publications I could write for, but I knew what I wanted. I was very focused. I wanted graphics and photography, and I didn't have money for any of the stuff really that I needed. But through a whole bunch of relationships with magazines and software companies, I managed to get access to virtually everything I needed without paying a single cent, especially for the software. I had to buy computers, yes, but I formed relationships with Alias software, which then became a part of Autodesk, Autodesk itself, the Adobe Corporation, and but the only software I've needed to buy is Microsoft Office and another program called Snagit for taking screenshots. But everything else, I've been able to do arrangements with software manufacturers using what they call NFR software, which stands not for resale. And so they would give me access to the software in exchange for reviews and tutorials. And so to this day, I've had a relationship approximately 25 years long with the Adobe Corporation. And because of the relationship, I'm able to get everything I need from them. So there's been that, but what's been happening a little while ago, I decided to make a major shift, which is to move away from writing and to become a commercial artist. So working in three major spaces, which is stained glass design. The other part of it is photographic illustration, and third part is 3D modeling for the purpose of doing sculptures and architectural cast panels of architectural manufacturers and interior designers. So 3D printing where they can print out an object and then make multiple molds of it for production runs and licensing, of course, because that's where the money is. I learned that a long time ago. You do something once, you get paid 10,000 times, and you make a nice chunk of money. You do that often enough, you can retire.
Right, right. Okay, so you went from uh, doing software in magazines, helping people, like helping the companies with that, doing reviews,
Yeah, like I've
and
been
on to be an
published.
artist.
Yeah, I've been published over 1,000 times in magazines all over the world. I
That's
have 12 books to my credit, one of which got me banned on Amazon because I was writing about the coronavirus.
oh,
I wrote a rather controversial book. It was called "If You've Been Scared of the Coronavirus, You're Suffering from the Effects of Mind Control." And I got banned for
Ooh, I
writing it.
love that. Ooh, I
yep,
love
Yeah.
I
that.
love that too.
Love that. So Nathan,
Oh, that's good.
you're not into systems controlling people, clearly.
I'm a whistleblower and I've been like that since I was very young. One of the things I did when I was in my early 20s, I was in a tech school and I had this one teacher who was always poking fun at two of us. Let me think. The other guy, trying to remember, I think he was Ukrainian or something, and me being Jewish, and he was always making comments. Like for me, it was the Hebrew, the Jew, the Lebanese, and I put up with this for 2 months and I laughed it off. And then one day something inside me went snap and I got really angry. And after that, I went straight to the dean of the school, who informed me that I needed to go to the department head, which I did. And the department head had a confrontation with the teacher, but the teacher later pulled me aside out of class and tried to create a fist fight with me. And had I fallen for it, I would have gone to jail. Fortunately, I knew what he was trying to do, even in my early 20s, and I didn't fall for it. But I was in the classroom afterwards and I was really angry. And I was waiting for the class to end because I was going to go straight to the dean again. And while we were in class, the department head walked in and I was on good terms with him. And he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Not good." And he said, "What's wrong?" I told him and he said, "I'll take care of it." And he did. And I never had another problem.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the few wins I've had in my life to do with stuff like that. But yeah, it was a win, a solid win.
So Nathan, you're detailed, you're creative, you got balls, you're not afraid to stand up and speak up. So what else have you used this for? Because you've done a ton of stuff as Tammy's diving into with you, but
Well, I mean, there is one thing that I want to do, and we didn't mention that the last time we were on a call, but once I start building my fortune the way I want to from the art, my intention is to take a portion of what I'm doing and give back in the forms of building a foundation. And the purpose of the foundation is to give people access to courses specifically to do with, well, one that I'm doing right now, which is really helpful, overcoming self-sabotage, which is extremely good, really great course. And the other one is to do with neurolinguistic programming. It's run by a friend of mine by the name of Rick Schnabel out of Australia. And it's teaching people all these mind strategies to help them overcome their limiting beliefs. So that's a part of what I want to do once I get up to speed.
It's a good endeavor.
Thank you.
So
can we see your art? Like,
yeah.
Sure. Hold on a second here. Let me call up a second, Nathan Segal art. I just got to call up a page here. There we go.
feel free to share your screen.
Yeah, I will in a second. I just had to call up my portfolio, and then I'll just share my screen here. Where are we? I just got to find the right screen. All windows. Where are they? Ah, there we are. Okay. Whoops. Can you see that reasonably well?
Yep.
Okay, let me scroll it up a bit. So this is actually from quite a long time ago. I was working with a team of photographers and designers. So what you're looking at is what they call a composite photography image. It was done for stock photography catalogs back in the day. And what you're looking at are four images here. So the Galileo spacecraft in the foreground is actually a paper model kit that I bought and built. The Earth is also a model. And so everything was, well, the background was created by Tony Hurley. The CD-ROM that creates that glow around the Earth was also photographed, and the Earth, of course, and then the Galileo, all those separate components and assembled in a program called Live Picture. So there's that. The next image here, again, using Live Picture and just a bunch of images. We just blended them. My role with the team was the computer guy, and I put everything together. So there's this one. This was done using 3ds Max for creating the flying saucers. So I did that. And then the background or the lower part is a shot of San Francisco, and I merged it together in Photoshop. So this just was for a client, a film reel using 3ds Max to create it. And this was a dare by one of my teachers in art school back in the days when I had dark hair and a mustache. And she wanted to see how good I was. And she said, I want you to take this image of you and this image of the planets and put them together. And I
Reminds
remember
me
thinking, no
Jean-Luc
sweat,
Picard, the younger Jean-Luc Picard. That's what I see.
something like that. Anyway, so I did that, and when I took the finished image to art school and showed my classmates, they were just going, "Okay, you know what you're doing." It was pretty funny. Freaked out one of my classmates too, which is even funnier.
It's awesome.
So this was a painting that I did in art school. All of the images you see are real, um, but they're all taken out of context. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because if I do, it'll spoil the mystery. But the title of the painting is called A Surrealistic View. So this image here was the centerpiece for an art show I did years ago.
I
It's
like
called
this.
Thank you. It was called The Dark Night. It was my journey through child abuse. And so the image that you're looking at, it looks real, but it actually isn't. The only thing that's real about it are the paint textures that I used, but it was actually created using a program called Poser. Then I output the mesh of the head to 3D specs, cut it apart to remove like the top and the eyes and so on. And then I layered textures on the mesh, output it in a couple of layers, brought it into Photoshop, retouched it, and this is the final result.
Very
So
cool.
thank you. So next up is my stained glass work. So this was taken off the part of the design was taken off a CD-ROM by Siddha Yoga, and I just built this piece just for the fun of it. Made a few of them for myself and friends. I had a major client back at the time that I was doing a lot of stained glass work, so this was one of many pieces I did for him. And this one as well. This is my personal favorite. Some point I'd like to make that again for myself. And this is all done using traditional stained glass methods, using lead cane and copper foil, cutting everything out by hand and using a grinder and all that sort of stuff. And then this one was a commission for a friend of ours who has since passed away. His name was Doug Christie, a rather infamous lawyer in Victoria, British Columbia. And he became a friend of mine, strangely enough. But I wound up doing this window for him. And anyway, so that's all of my stuff, just a small portfolio.
Now then, are you in Victoria?
Not anymore. I left
Well,
Canada in October of 2014. And with the exception of one trip back in summer of 2015, I've been living full-time in Mexico, where I am now.
oh,
Doug
well, the artsy
Christie.
part comes from Victoria for sure.
Yeah,
What's
that's
that?
for. I'm in Victoria right now, but Doug Christie. How do I know that name? The lawyer.
He was the infamous lawyer who, he was what would you call him? I'm just trying to think of no, not a prosecutor. He was the guy who defended a lot of the people who were accused of Holocaust denial, Jim Keekstra, Ernst Zundel, a whole bunch of these other people. And but he was also a major proponent for free speech, which is very quickly going down the toilet in Canada, as I'm sure you know. And yeah, I mean, at one point I was at a breakfast meeting. I was talking about Doug Christie, and one of my friends informed me that he had died 2 months previous, and I didn't know. And I got in contact with his widow right away, and she asked me to write a eulogy for him, which I did. I mean, Doug became a good friend of mine, and I didn't agree with everything he did, obviously, but there were some things that he did which I really did like. And I was very much in agreement with him about free speech. And what he said meshed with how I feel. So no issues there. But the Holocaust stuff, like a couple of years ago, I worked for an author in the States, and I wound up using Doug Christie's work as part of my research. And when I looked at some of his stuff, like when he was cross-examining some of the Holocaust survivors, one in particular was really obvious that the survivor was not credible. I mean, Doug made mincemeat out of the witness. And it's just, ooh, no wonder the Jewish community hated him so much. You know, the Jewish community was public enemy number one. And I was around for some of that. But yeah, it was really bizarre. I mean, he was my friend until he died. And that was like 10, 11 years ago now.
How do you approach, the fact that we're all going to end in one form or another? Is it a sobering thing? Is it a scary thing to you? How do you deal with your own finiteness?
Well, this is something I don't talk about much, but I've had some advanced spiritual training. And I'm trying to remember when it happened. I think it was like 2007 or so. I was like, in terms of spiritual practice, I was what I call a hardcore practitioner. I was really very dedicated and focused for a very long time. And twice along the journey, I encountered people who told me I was going to have what they call a spiritual awakening. And there's several people out there who, like famous people now, who have had that. Adyashanti is one, Stephen Bodian, my teacher, Jean Klein, Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, all of these people have had what they spiritual awakening. And at one point along my journey with Stephen Bodian, I'd been studying with him for 2 years. And at one point he said to me, "You're done." He said, "For you, spiritual awakening is going to happen." Now, months later, when I met him after the awakening took place, I told him about it. He said, "I don't remember saying that." I said, "Trust me, man, you did." But I also know that spiritual teachers are not supposed to say stuff like that. They aren't. That's a major no-no. But he told me that. And several months later, I experienced this thing called spiritual awakening, which completely changed the way that I view the world. I went from spiritual seeker to what they call the unflinching for that. It completely changed my personality. I became an entirely different person. My language changed, the way in which I moved in the world changed. And there was all this understanding about life and spiritual practice, because for me, looking at it, yeah, I get scared like everybody else when it comes to the form and what's going on in the world and so on. But at a deeper level, there are certain things that I know. A spiritual awakening, and please tell me if I'm talking too much. Spiritual awakening shows you who you are. And the way that I would describe it is beyond name and form, or another way of putting it is before name and form. And one of the things that happens when you have an awakening is you realize that you were never born and you will never actually die. What is born, what dies is this form and the personality and the conditioning. All of that dissolves at death. But who you really are, the essence of you, which is both of you here, which is exactly the same essence, that is eternal. It was not born, it was never dies. And so there were all these major realizations I had, one of which is that there is no soul and never was. That's part of like one of my teachers, Adyashanti, described it. He said, when you realize your true nature, you will realize that there's nothing to realize, something along those lines. Like when it happened for me, I remember like looking inside myself at the time. And I remember thinking like, well, specifically what happened, I was walking from my bedroom into the living room. And from one step to the other, I felt something turn over and fall out, or fall out straight down. And then all of a sudden I wound up looking up inside my head, etherically speaking, and into my body, and looking in the darkness inside me. And I saw what looked like a candle flare in the darkness. And then I heard a man's voice, a very deep man's voice, say, "I am." And then I stood there looking at the candle flame, and eventually it faded. And I just stood there looking in the darkness. And I remember thinking, my God, there's no one here. There is no person. So if there is no person, then who is bound and who is going to be liberated, who is born and who is going to die? And at that moment, I realized that this was what Ganguji referred to as the joke. And I started laughing in my mind because I realized that there was no person. There is no, like, you look at me and you say, okay, oh, his name is Nathan. He's got this story. He's got this condition, blah, blah, blah. That's all to do with the form. But inside, when I look inside, I know that there's no one here, and there never was. And I remember like another thing, like it was like a thing I created in my mind to do the journey of the spiritual seeker. So if you imagine that the spiritual seeker, they're before they become a seeker, they're just walking on a road, if you will. It goes up like this. And then at some point they become a seeker and they start going to the left or right, it doesn't matter, but they go to the left and they just go on this big, big arc. And then eventually they come back to where they are, right where they left off. That point is what they call spiritual awakening. And this whole journey, this loop, vanishes. When spiritual awakening happens, the seeker dissolves. My entire personality and everything I did before that happened is gone. I really can't remember much of anything. But when I came to that point, I remember thinking, my God, I've always known this. Where did I ever get the idea that I didn't know this? And at that point is when the next stage of the journey began, which is called the unfoldment. And in the unfoldment, as my teachers have said, all your shit comes up, all your negative characteristics, and you're going to be forced to deal with that. And they said, like, realistically, it takes something like 10 years or something to go through it. But I've been on this journey now for, I don't know, 15 years, 17 years, and I'm still on it, and it hasn't finished. And the unfoldment, as I call it, that goes on for the rest of your life. And there are all these realizations that happen along the way. And like, because if there is no soul and there is no person, then who is going to reincarnate? Because reincarnation doesn't exist either. That was one of my other realizations. And I remember talking to Stephen Bodian about some of this stuff and he just basically said to me, you know, everything you understand is correct. All of it. And I would like afterwards, like he said, it was like back in the day, you remember zip drives and stuff. And he wrote a book called Wake Up Now. And he was saying like a zip drive gets downloaded to your brain with everything you need to know. And there's a huge opening, which is what happened for me. And all the stuff that they say awakening is about, all the wonderful stuff, but then it contracts. And then there are all these things that happen and then it gradually starts to open again. And that happens for the rest of your life. So apologies if I've been a bit long-winded, but that's the story.
Wow. Tammy, what are your thoughts about all that?
That's super interesting. Super interesting. There's
It's
that.
not it's not common knowledge, but if you were to speak to Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, any of these people, they will tell you a very similar story. My own teacher, Stephen Bodian. I mean, one of the things they say about spiritual awakening is when it happens, it's self-confirming. You know what's happened. And that happened for me as well. I instantly knew. But I didn't speak to Stephen for a solid month. And when I finally spoke to him, it was because I was having some Kundalini stuff going on at the time that I didn't really understand. But he basically confirmed it. And then at one point I went to visit him and he was giving a class with all his students. And then at one point towards the end of the class, he was saying to all his students, and he said to them, you know, so many of you here want to know what a spiritual awakening is like. And then he points me out at the back and he says, you see that guy over there? He just recently had a spiritual awakening. You want to find out what it's like? You talk to him. It's like, oi! It was pretty funny at the time, but I was like, what do you want me to tell you? But
Everybody
it is
wants the details.
well, the funny thing is that the stories are real. The stories of what it would be like are actually true. But you won't know until it actually happens. The rest is all theory and conjecture and wishful thinking and hoping and wishing, whatever. But until it actually happens, you don't know. It's like Ramesh Balsekar. He was of Advaita. And he said, it's like you're on a staircase. And it may be a staircase of only 10 steps or 300 steps. So from the 9th step to the 10th, or the 299th to the 300th step, it's always a surprise. And I would agree. Yeah, he was correct. It's always a surprise. But there is one thing I can share with your listeners, or your viewers, which is very important about this whole journey, which I realized afterwards. There are no rules. There are no merit badges. There are no purifications. If this thing called life wants to wake up to itself through you, it's going to happen. And you can slow it down, you can delay it, but you can't stop it. But there are, like if somebody says you have to do all these purifications and stuff, I'm here to say that they're full of shit. None of that's true. Like as an example, and Stephen told me about both of them, a guy by the name of Tony Parsons in England, he was walking across a grassy field one day, and between one step and another, he woke up. Another story that he told me about was of a woman with an antique dealer. She was on her way to work. She had no spiritual practice at all, and boom, she woke up. There are no rules, none, zero. No merit badges to attain, no purifications, none of that. If life wants to up to itself through you, it's going to happen. And that's the one thing I can say for sure.
Can you say that sentence again? If life wants to
wake up to itself through you, then it will happen. And one of the things you'd realize is that the same one, as I refer to it, I call it the one, people call it consciousness, universal consciousness, God, whatever. To me, it's all the same, but I use the word the one because as well, for me, it works. And it's the same thing that is peering through all sets of eyes. So to someone watching this who hasn't had that happen, they will see all these individual people. But if you've had this thing in like, especially in this moment, it's like the apparent me is looking at the apparent you guys. But the reality is that the one is looking through these eyes and looking through your eyes and looking through your eyes back at the apparent me and having a conversation with itself. That's the reality of what's really going on. So, and the closest analogy that I can use to awakening is the movie The Matrix, which is one of my favorites. You know, when Morpheus hauls Neo up into the into this space or this shuttlecraft and looks in and says, "Welcome to the real world." It's like that. You go up and out, and all of a sudden you see everything for the way it really is, not the way you've been told. And one of the things I realized is not virtually, was false. And what I learned to get to where I got to, because when you get to where you need to go, everything vanishes because you no longer need it, because you've arrived.
Right.
And you no longer need the path, you no longer need the boat, whatever it is. It all vanishes, and then you're just, oh, that's cool. Now what? So not the kind of conversation expected to have, I'm sure.
This is amazing. This is amazing.
This is way better.
It only has gotten better and better.
That's
That's what's gone on. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I am.
Nathan, that's where I'm somewhere on that journey too. I'm curious for Tammy where you are, but for me, I found the more I've done this journey of Empower Network TV for the last almost 14 months and been interviewing people that were outside of my box, my matrix. You know, they had their own beliefs. We all had our own beliefs, and I'm finding most of it so far is dissolving. The more I actually open up to what is really going on, not what I was told to believe, these boxes are all dissolving in my life, and I'm going, well, what now?
Well, it's meant to dissolve. Like Audrey Sarunti said, spiritual awakening is the ultimate setup. You think you're going to attain something, and to a degree, that's true. But then you wind up on the other side of it, which is a process of demolition, I think is the word he used. And all these things that you thought and so on are going to dissolve. And he was also, there's, and there are different things that happen. Like there's a video that he did called I think it's called The Journey of Awakening, which is really worth watching. And it talks about what happens before the actual awakening. Actually, there are a couple of films. I'm trying to remember what they are, but it was, there's a journey after awakening, that's spiritual awakening. And then this other one, I don't quite recall the title, but it was along those lines. And the journey before you get there. And before there, before it happened, I started having some major realizations, major understandings. Like one of them was like back before the awakening happened, like about 5 years before it. There's one spiritual teacher that all of us were very fond of. His name is Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. And there's a famous book that was a compilation of his teachings called I Am That. But the vast majority of students had tremendous difficulty understanding it. Me too. Until one day, I had a major realization that changed everything. And that realization is that the book, the teachings were probably written in a language called Marathi, which was a language of India. And in that language, there were multiple versions of the word you, but in English, we only have only one word, like in Spanish, tú, usted. But in English, we only have one, you. And that was creating all the confusion. So just to give you an idea, and this is something I learned from my teacher, Stephen Bodian, which he learned from Jean Klein, which was his teacher. And Jean Klein's, one of his favorite teachings was, you are present when you are absent. Now, if you're an English speaker, that's going to confuse the crap out of you. What the hell does that mean? Well, when I had the realization, I understood what it meant. So let me say it again and translate it. So you are present, which is eternal mind, consciousness is present when you, the ego mind, is absent. You, eternal consciousness, are present when you, the ego mind, is absent. That's the translation. That's what it means. And when you have that understanding, and so I had this one teacher, a friend of mine, his name was, oh God, I want to say Carlos, probably not. It's not that. But anyway, he wanted me to write a book with him, and I said, we don't need a book. People just need to know this. And when they know this, they'll be able to translate all of Nisargadatta's teachings, because there's inevitably the word you in there. And I remember sitting down with an ex-girlfriend, I read a passage from Nisargadatta, and I literally watched her eyes glaze over. She didn't understand. And then I said, let me read it back to you with the translation. And I read it and explained it to her, and I literally watched the clouds of her eyes vanish and go back to clear. And she looked at me and she said, so that's what it means. I said, so that's what it means. So a very important thing for your listeners, if they're studying the teachings of Nisargadatta, or even some of the other teachings, the major confusion is caused by the word you. And once you understand that, then you'll be able to figure out the teachings that will make sense.
That's brilliant to know that, because yeah, some of those teachings are terribly confusing, and
Well,
never crossed my mind in that way, to think of it that way.
Well, it didn't cross my mind either. It was just one of the things that came to me. I mean, that's been part of my journey, is that I receive knowledge. I don't know why. I just receive knowledge, and I know stuff without being taught. Like many, many years ago, I had a Kundalini awakening. And and I remember it just this burst at the base of my spine, this 3-inch long worm or snake wiggled up my spine at high speed, went right over the top of my head, hit me in the third eye. I saw twin tongues of flame go straight out like that, which was an exact match for the Ajna chakra. And then I started experiencing kriyas, which are known as spontaneous yogic postures. And I was flooded with knowledge. And a voice in my head said to me to speak to my girlfriend and give her a teaching on one-pointedness, which I did without any previous knowledge of it. It just was there. I just knew.
Wow.
And Yeah, I mean, this kind of thing has happened repeatedly all the way through my life. At different times, knowledge will show up. And I know stuff and I can't tell you how I know it. I just know it. And I don't have to study. It's just there.
So who is
Hmm.
the
So,
you? Who
well,
is
the
the
you is,
you?
well, that's part of a teaching of Ramana Maharshi, which is either who am I, the one that I heard, which was very useful, or I think the original teaching was something like, who is this me? I don't know if that's true or not, but it's something I'd heard. But the teaching I heard that I got as part of what we did was, who are you? And we, like one time, a group I was in, we were in dyas. So like sitting across from each other with our knees almost touching, and we'd ask the question back and forth. And then the person would answer. And it's a really great technique for figuring out who you are. It's very helpful. It's just one of many tools, many pointers, but it's a good one. I like it. And if you work this hard enough, you push it hard enough. Um, again, no rules. I don't know who's going to wake up or who isn't. I remember looking around me at the time after it happened, and I thought, why me? There's so many other people around me who I thought were more worthy than me. But it didn't happen to them. It happened to me, and I don't know why. I have no idea. Can't tell you that.
Jeannie, sorry, Jeannie, Tammy. My mind is just swirling right now.
That's normal.
Yeah, we should wrap the interview, Tammy. Do you want to
Okay.
yeah, we need to. This has been an absolute blast, Nathan. Dancing in these thoughts and these considerations. Tammy, what are your last thoughts here?
Um, I just wanted to know if you were, since that happened, did you find it difficult to be Nathan in the?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. For a solid month, actually longer, I lost my ability to be in the world. I didn't know what to say or how to function. I remember after it happened, I remember feeling like I was a lighthouse with a really bright light emanating from me in every direction. And I thought that when I went out into the world, everybody would notice. But virtually nobody did, except for one guy that I used to see every time I went out to Starbucks for coffee in Cook Street Village in Victoria. Um, and I would see this guy. And one day I walked in, we were sitting in a group, and I could see him looking at me and the way that we were talking. And I instantly knew that he knew. And this went on for a week, and there were little bits of spiritual stuff being thrown out. And then after a week, we went for a walk, just the two of us. And we're just walking down the sidewalk in front of the Starbucks. And I looked at him and said, when did you know? He said, as soon as you walked in. I instantly knew you'd had an awakening. He was the only person who knew it. And there were other people that I met, people who had had the awakening as well. They could see it. They knew. But it's a very subtle thing. But I just remember asking him, like, when did you know? He said, it the moment you walked in. I instantly knew. And it changed everything. And we were friends for a while, and then I started traveling, and I haven't seen him since. But he knew, and I looked at him. I also said to him, "So, when did it happen for you?" And he said, 10 years ago. A similar story. So it happened a long time ago for me. Like, I don't really remember when. I think it was around 2007. It might have been later, but definitely well over 10 years ago. It's not something I talk about very often. At one point, I thought I wanted to be a spiritual teacher, but when I saw the drama that goes around teachers, I thought, nah. And so I've been in the place of what they call a hidden yogi for a very long time. And I only talk about it if somebody asks me a really serious question. They say, oh, like a buddy of mine from Canada, he asked me a question along those lines. I said, okay, before I answer that, it's like, do you really want to know the answer to this? I said to him, because I'm not going to tell you if you're not serious. If you're not serious, I'll give you a bullshit answer. But if you're really serious, I'll tell you. And I think I shocked my poor friend. But he got a very long answer, like being here.
I love that statement. If you really want to know, I'll tell you. I honestly,
Yeah.
Nathan, tell me where are you at with this? But I'm to the point where I just keep asking. Every day, throughout the day, I'm just praying. I'm going, God, universe, spirit, whatever is true, whatever is right, please show me. I just want to know. Whatever it is, I don't give
Yeah,
a damn. I just want to know.
I did the same thing. I quite literally did the same thing. And like I was a part of City Yoga for a very long time, but I quit because they kept giving us the same thing and said finding the teaching. And it was the equivalent of being given pablum when I was wanting steak. And so I quit and I was a part of Advaita for a while. Then through a friend in Victoria, I was introduced to Stephen Bodian, who was passed the Dharma by Adyashanti, who was also one of my favorite teachers. And I started working with Stephen Bodian. I worked with him for 2 years. And he said to me at one point, he said, spiritually, you're in good shape, but psychologically, you need a lot of work, which is true. But at one point, after 2 years, he said to me, you're done. For you, spiritual awakening is going to happen. His words, not mine. And I remember feeling a combination of excitement and dread. And then 3 or 4 months later was when I woke up. Best way to describe it. They call it spiritual awakening for a very good reason. Because when it happens, you just come out of whatever it is that you thought you were or the way that you thought things were, and you suddenly see things for the way things really are, not the way you've been told. I mean, a couple of other things, a couple of other parting things like, you know, teaching from Stephen Bodian, it's like you wind up living in two worlds at once, the world of the absolute and the world of the relative. And so Stephen put it, from this perspective of the absolute, everything is perfect as it is. But if the roof leaks, you need to get it repaired. And so there's that. The other thing, like one of my favorite teachings, to do with the hypnosis of the belief that in the person that you think you are. In my opinion, it's a form of hypnosis. But and when you come out of it, you know who you are. Like when you have the awakening, you realize that there's nothing to realize that you've always known this. But this one teaching that I really love is having never left the house, you're looking for the way home. And that's the hypnosis. The belief that you are this person. And when in fact you're not, and you never were. But like Stephen Bodian, he had this thing on his website, Enlightenment is Your Birthright. And the reality is that all of us have this when we were born, but it gets conditioned out of us and covered over. So we forget who we really are. But if we encounter it, who knows how to do it, that teacher can help guide us back. And one day, if it's meant to happen, you remember, among other things. And I remember thinking, wait a second, I've always known this. Where did I ever get the idea that I didn't know this? That's the reality of it.
Well,
probably a good place to end.
Yeah, this was phenomenal. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Tammy, for being here and contributing to this masterful discussion, in my opinion. Thank you for Tammy. What are your thoughts here? We're going to wrap in 1 minute.
Absolutely amazing. And you said you do not teach this. This is not your.
No, I will talk to people about it. I'll give people pointers. I don't know if somebody said to me that they wanted to study with me on this, I would give them some very specific practices. But some of the stuff that I've learned, I didn't learn it from Stephen. Like there was one major practice that came to me 10 years ago. I was here in Mexico. I was in Bucerias. I was really upset that one night. And I was listening to a teaching by Eckhart Tolle. And you can find the teaching online. It's called Transforming Illness and Suffering. And I think it's on a site called Grand Times or something like that, the print form. But there was a video at the time, and which was just an audio and a picture of Eckhart. But I remember listening to this, and I remember hearing something in it, and I remember making an instant decision to live differently. And then as the teaching went on, something else happened, and I felt a shift, and something dropped into a slot. And then instantly my thinking dropped by about 90%. And all of a sudden I felt this huge plane of silence rise up inside me. And after that, I started living in silence for long periods of time, literally hours at a time. And after that, I'd been given access to one of the, as far as I can tell, one of the most important, profound teachings. You may have heard that the best teachings are given in silence, which is true. Mm. And so when that happened, if you listen to Eckhart Tolle, there's a video of him out there, and I remember listening to it, watching it. This one was a real video in this case. And he said, you know, when you get to a certain stage with this, then you're ready for the advanced teaching. And the advanced teaching is only 2 words: stop thinking. Now, if you get to that place, and I did a long time ago, you can literally stop thinking. And when that happens, so you feel silence everywhere. There's virtually nothing going on here at all, very little. And the thoughts will be like clouds passing in the sky. But for the most part, it'll be quiet inside, and you will notice everything. You'll hear everything around you. Sounds will come and go, things will come and go. But there's no suffering because there's no thinking. There's some people who say, oh, well, feelings, you know, blah, 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 cause suffering. I'm going, sorry, but you're full of shit. That's not true. And I know it's not true. Thinking, dysfunctional thinking to be exact, is what causes suffering. No thinking, if there's no thinking, you cannot suffer. Not possible. And this has really, you know, stirred up a few, but it is the truth. No thinking, no suffering. You're just quiet.
It's perfect.
You're just quiet, and you experience life, but there's no you
Well,
inside you.
we have to end it here. Nathan,
Sure.
thank you for being here.
Welcome.
Thanks, Tammy, for joining. If you've been watching Empower Network TV, we'll be tagging Nathan Segal. Connect with him. He'd love to connect with you. And we'll end the broadcast here. This is awesome, everybody.